Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 26 deadline decisions. This is a weekly series where I take you through your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline, and I'll also round up the press conference updates and take you through my final team thoughts as well. If you get any use out of today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, as always, I thought a good place to start, I'll be rounding up the key information from the press conferences and just updating you on any news that we have around key players that you might be looking to bring in or potentially sell in your FPL teams. And there were actually quite a few surprises today. The number one being that Rasmus Hojlund is out injured for 2 to 3 weeks with a muscle injury and is almost therefore definitely going to miss not only Game Week 26, but importantly for Manchester United, the Manchester Derby in Game Week 27 as well. And therefore, sadly, if you own him or if you're one of the 400,000 managers that moved early for him, you probably are going to have to sell him because yes, he could be back for 28, but there's no confirmation he even plays in 29. And if he's going to miss this blank game week, you're probably short on players already. Even if you've taken a hit to bring him in, it's probably worth then taking another hit to take him out because there's just no confirmation that he's even back for 29. And then if he doesn't play in 28, and then if he doesn't play in 29, it might be game week 30 until you get him back. So sadly, I do think Hojlund's a sell. And if you were looking to go there, obviously, I wouldn't now. Just quickly on the Manchester United attack. Without Hojlund, we are absolutely terrible. And that's not just an eye test thing. That's also backed up by the stats. If it's Rashford through the middle and then one of Anthony or Bruno on the right and then Garnacho on the left, it's not an awful attack. But I think I saw a stat on Twitter today that we are averaging 1 goal per game when we don't have Rasmus Hojlund through the middle and we play Rashford through the middle, someone on the right and Garnacho on the left. So it's certainly not a great lineup. That being said, Fulham are without Paulinho, which does massively impact their team, and they are pretty poor without him. So it will basically be, can a pretty weak Manchester United attack beat a Fulham the defence that isn't very good without their key player missing? If you have Garnacho, if you were looking to bring him in, I'm not sure this would put me off massively, but I certainly wouldn't be rushing out to buy other Manchester United players at the moment. On Crystal Palace, Elise, Eze and Guehi are all confirmed as being unavailable for the Burnley game. The reason I bring that up is a lot of us are relying on Charlie Taylor. Company didn't say anything about Charlie Taylor in the press conference, which is probably a good thing because he's now back fit. He obviously got minutes off the bench in Game Week 25. Fingers crossed he starts, because if he does, this is a very, very weak Palace side. And you never know, you could get a clean sheet and or attacking returns. Maybe a little bit greedy there, but definitely fine to start Charlie Taylor this week if you are down to your bare bones. Next, we're on Arsenal. Maybe not overly important for FPL, but Zinchenko was quoted as being close, but not quite ready for Game Week 26. And Jesus and Partey were quoted as being very close. I think the fact that Jesus is very close would probably put me off having Trossard in my team, unless you're on a free hit, or unless you think there is a good chance that you will be wildcarding in 27, because I do think Trossard will get another start in 26. And it may well be that Trossard becomes first choice along with Havertz, and it's Jesus that sits out. But from what we've seen from Arteta in the past, he wants to play Jesus. He does love Havertz as well. And I don't think there'll be many games that Jesus, Havertz and Trossard all manage to start for Arsenal. So this would probably put me off Trossard if you're looking for a slightly longer term transfer in. On West Ham, Paqueta is now back in training and very close to returning, and he's also in contention for Game Week 26. That is brilliant news if you own or are looking to bring in Bowen or Kudus, because without Paqueta, I don't know if it's Paqueta or Paqueta. I've been saying Paqueta, but everyone seems to say Paqueta. I'll just stick with Paqueta. If you are looking to bring in Kudus or Bowen, they have been really, really poor without Paqueta, and I think he's the main creative force for that team. And you can see the drop-off in Bowen's stats in particular when Paqueta's not in the team is so, so notable. Kudus' stats have actually been poor throughout the season, and we'll discuss that a bit later on today. But Bowen in particular, I think this will be a massive advantage for him. And I think Antonio being back as well also allows Bowen to play in his favoured right-wing position. So I think this is good news for West Ham in general. On Liverpool, Szoboszlai, Salah and Darwin are all going to be assessed ahead of the EFL Cup final, but none of them have been ruled out. The reason I bring that up is if you have Salah or Darwin in your team and you are hoping to bring them through blank Game Week 26 and maybe play them against Forest in Game Week 27, it looks like Salah and Darwin have an opportunity at least, although they're probably not giving too much away, of playing in Game Week 27. So maybe you want to hold them. But I think for a lot of us, especially if we're not looking to free hit in 29, Liverpool are probably a sell anyway. And then Alisson, Trent and Jota have been ruled out until the end of March, which is post the next international break. So Game Week 29, 30-ish. So we're not going to get them anytime soon. So if you own the likes of Bradley, potentially, and then Kelleher, you're very likely to get them, if not definitely going to get them playing in game week 27. So a little bit of an update around Liverpool there. On Newcastle, Isak and Willock could be back fit and featuring, and we're expecting them to be back in the squad, but not many people own those two. And then the one that quite a few people still do own is Fabian Schär, and it looks like Fabian Schär will be available and will probably feature at the very least off the bench, but maybe even starting against Arsenal. So that is really good news. Again, if you're down to your bare bones and you were hoping to start Fabian Schär, it looks pretty good for you. On Aston Villa, Kamara has undergone his ACL repair injury. We know now that Kamara will not be back for the remainder of the season. But what we did get an update on is Ezri Konsa, and Konsa is progressing, whatever that means. But it looks like he'll be back soon. But game week 26 is unfortunately going to be too soon for him. I would not be selling Konsa if you have him, simply because unless you are looking to free hit in 29, he will be an excellent option for game week 29 if he's fit by then. And I just think, based on the information that we've got currently, the fact that it wasn't a serious injury and that he's progressing well, it probably means that he'll, assuming there's no setbacks, be available in 29 for you. So I would probably be looking to sell other players. You can still bring in a Pau Torres as well, but I will just hold on to Ezri Konsa. On Brentford, it looks like Brian Mbeumo, by the way, may be fit the other side of the international break again towards the end of March, which is really positive news for Brentford. And then Pinnock, Hickey, Sade, and Henry all remain out. The reason that is important, Hickey and Henry both being out, means that Reguilon is definitely nailed for the time being. And if you are looking to bring a defender, Reguilon is probably the one. If you still have Pinnock in your team, it's tricky because I know I've just said keep Konsa. I guess that kind of might apply to Pinnock, but we don't really have a definitive update on when Pinnock is back. His next two fixtures aren't great anyway, even if he was back. I might be slightly more tempted to sell Pinnock than I would Konsa, but if you've got other players that you could sell instead whilst we wait for a more definitive update, then maybe you could look to hold on to him. But for me, Pinnock may be a sell, and I would definitely be looking at Reguilon if you're going for a Brentford defender. And then finally, the other piece of interesting news we've had around Brighton is that Matoma is actually a major doubt / pretty much ruled out, if you listen to the De Zerbi presser, for game week 26 with a back injury. So he said he'll assess him ahead of game week 26, but he thinks he'll be out. So if you're looking to bring in Matoma, I wouldn't be doing so now. Maybe go for someone like a Dinger instead, or of course, Pascal Gross is the safest of options. And definitely, again, a shame if you've moved earlier, if you own him. If you do own him, maybe you've got other players you can sell once again and you want to hang on to him because it doesn't sound overly serious, but we don't yet know that information. So again, if you have the ability to, just be a sell, because in game week 26, you really need all of the players that you can get. The other interesting thing, which was pretty funny, not really an update, but Estepinian, along with Ansu Fati, was invited to De Zerbi's house for pasta. Apparently, he does it on a rotation for Brighton, where he invites a couple of players to his home to have Italian food with him in his Italian kitchen. And I just thought it was interesting that Estepinian was invited to De Zerbi's house this week. And I did make a joke over on Twitter that you can't invite Estepinian for pasta and then not start him in 26. But just very briefly on Estepinian, if you own him, I would probably start him this week, and I would expect to start. But don't be surprised, obviously, if he's benched again, because there might be something going on behind the scenes. But based on this, it can't be too serious. It can't be that he's really in De Zerbi's bad books. So I would feel pretty comfortable, given the other players that we have blank in this week, to just play Estepinian and hope that he gets some minutes off the bench at the worst case, but hopefully will start for you and may get you some attacking returns. I think that's all of the key press updates here, apart from Kevin De Bruyne. The reason I wanted to discuss that separately is it's quite a long quote from Pep, and I wanted to dissect it a little bit because I know a lot of people have that decision around whether to sell or keep De Bruyne this week. As I said, I just wanted to discuss KDB separately, simply because the quote was quite a long one. Obviously, if you don't own KDB and you're not interested, you can skip this section, but it is also applicable to both Alvarez and Foden as well, because if KDB is out, I would be very surprised to see Foden or Alvarez benched. I mean, I probably don't expect to see Foden or Alvarez benched anyway, but it would be virtually impossible, let's say, if KDB's out, to see one of those on the bench. That's going to get clipped. That's famous last words. But on the quote from Pep on De Bruyne, here is the full quote tweeted by Ben Dunnery. So he said, good about De Bruyne. Good, not injured. I don't know if he's 100%. I think we took a good decision to rest him midweek. Don't take a risk. He didn't feel comfortable. By the way, it was very difficult to piece. I watched the press conference as well. The way that Pep talks is like in little bits and pieces, and it makes it very difficult to quote. But that was the first bit. And then someone asked a follow-up question, will you have to protect him this weekend? And he said, I don't know. We have training at 4 p.m. That's not a lie, by the way. City do train on a Friday afternoon. And then he said the day after the game, he trained. Yesterday, he was off, so he didn't train yesterday, but we will assess and decide. And then he followed that up with, I'm sure he will travel. So by all accounts, it does look very likely like that De Bruyne will travel with the squad to Bournemouth and will be available from the bench, assuming there are no further setbacks. I do believe Pep when he says that. Someone did sort of just try and tease it out a little bit more, and he just said, I don't know. He said, if I knew, I would tell you. And the thing is with Pep, he does get bad stick from FPL managers in the press for saying things in his press conferences, but I largely think he is quite honest in his pressers. And if players are out, he tends to say they're out. So I would take this as De Bruyne is available and he thinks he can be included in some regard, but it is going to be fully on the medical staff. And to be honest, it always is. But I think Pep is literally going to put all of his faith in the medical staff and just say, if he's available, I'll play him. And if not, I won't. My natural instinct here is that De Bruyne won't start. And the reason I say that is he was out for such a long time and it was such a difficult injury for him to get over that I just don't see them risking him. I think in their head, they'll be thinking, as well as not wanting to risk it for him personally, from a selfish team perspective, they need him for the back end of the season. Like, we've seen the difference in performances of when De Bruyne plays versus when he doesn't. And it's not to say City can't win without him. It's just to say that when these crunch games come later in the season, they're going to want De Bruyne in the team. And I think Bournemouth is a team, no disrespect to Bournemouth, but a fixture where they can see themselves winning that without having to risk De Bruyne, give him a little bit longer to recover, and maybe just take him on the bench if they feel like they really need him. That is just my guess. I can present the exact quote to you. That's all the information I have, but my interpretation of that is that there's not a necessity to risk De Bruyne here, unless the medical staff say absolutely 100% he's fully recovered, there is no sign of any reoccurrence of the injury, he's absolutely fine to play, in which case Pep may start him. I would be extremely shocked, though, if you get more than 60 minutes. I think if he starts, it's an early sub. And I think if he doesn't start, there is a chance that he just sits on the bench and doesn't come on, especially, again, if City are winning comfortably. The difficult decision comes is, what do you do with him then? I will just say that City are playing on Saturday, but it is the 5:30 p.m. kickoff. However, the FPL deadline isn't actually until the afternoon. So we don't have a morning kickoff. Therefore, the deadline is at 1:30 p.m. UK time. So I think, therefore, because we've had often updates when City play at 3 p.m. and the deadline's a bit earlier, I think we will get a leak, at the very least, about whether De Bruyne has travelled. But I think we'll get some information based on the sources that we now have available to us about whether De Bruyne starts or not. So if possible, if you're in a time zone to do so and you do not have a busy Saturday, tune into my deadline stream. I can't promise to get you information, but if there is any information out there, I will get it to you. And if I own De Bruyne, that's what I would be doing. I would be sitting there watching my deadline stream and trying to work out if he starts or not. But if we don't get that, let's say you can't do that, or we just don't get any update, I think I would risk and just keep him. The reason I say that is because there is always a chance that even if he doesn't start again, he comes off the bench. Are you that confident that who you bring in is going to score? Because this is probably for a hit, score more than 4 points. There are some players out there like a Neto or a Hwang, absolutely. But are you that confident? Potentially not. And the other reason is I think the best replacement for De Bruyne is probably Heung-min Son if you're not free hitting in 29. And if you are free hitting in 29, I'd argue it's Salah. I would be looking at Son or Salah in for De Bruyne, depending on your strategy, and both of them blank this week, so you can't bring them in. And yes, you could just take a short 1 week punt on another player instead, but it just doesn't feel like the best move to me. So I think I would be leaning towards keeping, but it's easy for me to say that when I don't own him. Hopefully you'll get some news. Like I said, tune into the deadline stream on Saturday before the deadline, and hopefully I'll get some information to you. So lots of questions coming in about Wolves, and rightly so. Lots of people looking to bring in the likes of Hwang and Neto in midfield this week, maybe looking at an 8 Nuri in defence. Some questions around Sarabia too, wanting to know about penalties, fixtures, game week 29. So I thought we'd just have a bit of a chat about Wolves, because obviously they are a major talking point this week. They are being considered for the right reasons. When we actually start with the fixtures are exceptionally good over the next 3. So when we're looking, what I've got here is the non-penalty expected goals conceded for their next 3 fixtures against Sheffield United, Newcastle and Fulham for the entire season. So I've got the ranking of the team. So Sheffield United are 19th for expected goals conceded this season, non-penalty, which is the 2nd worst defence in the league. Newcastle are the 3rd worst defence in the league, so 18th. And then Fulham are ranked 14th. So in the next 2 games, they are playing 2 of the 3 worst defences in the league. And then Fulham have not been particularly good this season either. And actually recently, they've even looked a little bit more vulnerable. So these are 3 very good fixtures. And the next 2 in particular are exceptionally strong. And game week 26, Sheffield United at home, it does feel like the best fixture of the bunch this week. Maybe alongside Arsenal's fixture against Newcastle. So the fixtures are really, really strong. Then if we look at game week 29, because I still feel like some people are a little bit confused, especially for Wolves, because it's the most confusing one, about whether they will play Bournemouth in game week 29. So For Wolves to play in Game Week 29 in the FA Cup 5th round next week, which is before Game Week 27, we'll find this information out, Wolves need to lose to Brighton, which is the first game. So Wolves need to lose to Brighton and Bournemouth need to lose to Leicester. So we need to see Brighton beat Wolves and Leicester beat Bournemouth. And if both of those happen, and we need both to happen, then Wolves versus Bournemouth would actually go ahead in Game Week 29. It is one of the reasons why my double transfer, and we'll discuss my team at the end, could well be Hwang and Solanke in. Not only because I like Solanke for 27 and 28, and I like Hwang for the next 3. The other reason is that I actually think Wolves to lose to Brighton, I would expect Brighton to beat Wolves. So then you're basically saying, what is the chance that a flying Leicester team beat Bournemouth? I don't think that unlikely. I would certainly say Bournemouth will be favourites, but that wouldn't surprise me. So I actually think there is a not likely chance, but there's a possibility at least that Wolves and Bournemouth goes ahead in 29. If that's the case, you've then got Sheffield United, Newcastle, Fulham, a player in 29, Aston Villa away, which isn't the worst fixture given that Kamara is out. We don't know when Konsa will return. And then they've got Burnley away in 31. The fixtures actually continue beyond that as well. There is a situation where you could end up keeping your Wolves assets until 33, 34 based on the fixtures. The reason that everyone is so keen on Hwang is a couple of things. His non-penalty expected goals per 90 is actually really good. So he has one of the best goal threats for players around that price. It's not exceptionally strong. It's sat at about 0.35 per 90. So it's not fantastic. But it is up there, and it's better than a lot of the other players we'll be looking at in the likes of Bailey, Neto, Douglas Luiz, Kudus. It's slightly lower than Bowen's for the season, but not much lower. So with Hwang, you feel like you are getting a pretty good goal threat. And obviously with Cunha being out, he is going to be playing as the number 9. So it's an out-of-position player with really good goal threat. The other reason that people are keen on Hwang is the fact that he could be on penalties. We did discuss this earlier in the week, but essentially, Hwang took a penalty earlier in the season, but Sarabia was not on the pitch when he took it. Then when Hwang went off to the Asian Cup, he took a penalty when Son was on the pitch and apparently just demanded that he took it. Son gave it to him and he scored it. But whilst he was away at the Asian Cup, Sarabia took a penalty and he also scored it. And Sarabia has actually scored 17 out of 17 penalties at club level. He did miss one against Morocco, but there is a discussion around we've not actually seen them both on the pitch at the same time when Wolves have got a penalty. I am led to believe, and I don't know this for sure, I promise you this isn't in the know, I'm led to believe that most people associated with Wolves seem to think that Sarabia will be first choice for penalties. There are, of course, some people at Wolves that think it will be Hwang, or Wolves fans at least, but if you were to push me and say who's first choice on pens, there's an important penalty in the game and both are on the pitch, I do think it's Sarabia. Now, this isn't putting me off Hwang massively for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't know that. Hwang could still comfortably just grab the ball off Sarabia and say, I will take it. And if someone's that confident, you never know. Sarabia could just say, do you know what, I'll give it to you. The other reason is Sarabia is actually not always on the pitch for 90 minutes. In fact, he's very rarely on the pitch for 90 minutes, often gets subbed between sort of 60 and 75. A lot of penalties in the Premier League are in the final 15, 20 minutes of the game when teams are starting to fatigue and their decision-making goes in the bin. So for at least 15 minutes of every game, you'd probably expect Hwang to be on penalties regardless. And then the final reason is Hwang is just a great asset without penalties too. It is the penalties which makes him a really good asset for that price, but I am still leaning towards bringing him in myself because it does feel like overthinking slightly not doing it. And I'm not saying you have to, but you've got an out-of-position player with 3 of the best fixtures in the league coming up, a possibility to play in 29, playing out of position, possibly on penalties with really good open play goal threat. There's very little to dislike about him. I am leaning more and more towards it. On people that are wondering why is no one looking at Neto, the reason for that is their expected goal involvement is very similar, i.e., Neto and Hwang are expected to get roughly the same amount of attacking returns as each other based on the underlying data. The issue or slight limitation, I suppose, we have with Neto's data is that most of his is made up through expected assists. So he's very, very creative, but he's not got much open play goal threat. Whereas the majority of Hwang's is made up through open play goal threat, and he's not got as much creativity. And in general, we would just prefer our players scoring goals. They get more points for goals, and sometimes better bonus points for goals as well. And especially for midfielders, they get 2 extra points for a goal. It just feels worth going for the player with the greater goal threat, with the possibility of also having penalties as well. So for me, I do think Hwang is a better asset than Neto, but I don't think there's a massive amount in it. And if you want to double up, that's fine. Or if you just fancy going for Neto instead to differentiate slightly, I absolutely like that as well. And then just to finish off, I also do like the Wolves defence. They're not a fantastic defence, by the way, so don't expect lots of clean sheets. But given the fixtures, I don't mind a punt on Ait-Nouri, Kilman or Dawson. I think Ait-Nouri is the most attacking, although his data hasn't necessarily been great, but just eye test and touch map wise, he is getting very, very high up the pitch. But outside that, I'd probably go for Dawson. I just think he's always got a bullet header in him, and I quite like him as an asset. So I do think Wolves are being talked about for the right reasons. I don't think they're being overhyped, but I equally don't think if you wanted to go for another midfielder instead, rather than Hwang or Neto, I don't think that's an issue at all. And a little bit later in the video, we are going to, maybe even in the next section, we're going to talk about the best midfielders to buy as well. So I've spoken a lot about midfielders this week. Actually, pretty much my entire game week preview video was dedicated on the key midfielders. So if you want more of a statistical comparison about the key midfielders in FPL for this week to buy, please go and watch the game week preview video, which was released on Wednesday. But here is my rough ranking of the 10 best midfielders to buy in FPL at the moment. There is no science to this ranking. It's just kind of the order in which I think they are great assets. And it does really depend on your strategy. And the reason for that is I've got the likes of Kudus, Bowen and Douglas Luiz on here. There is not a chance I would be looking at any of them if I was committing to a free hit in 29, or if I knew I was wildcarding in 27 or 28. If I knew for a fact that I wasn't going to need this player in 29, they just wouldn't be on there, because they're only on there because they have some okay fixtures, but they also have a confirmed fixture in 29. So do bear that in mind, that it is dependent on your strategy. For example, if you're looking to free hit in 29, not this week, but next week, I'd be kind of picking up Salah if he's fit. But obviously, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to free hit in 29. So it really, this is the point of the season. It's a little bit difficult as a content creator, and also for you consuming the content, where you have to take my opinion on board, but also apply it to the strategy that you're hoping to achieve. I don't think you need to decide your strategy this week, by the way. We'll discuss that in a bit, that game week 27 is really the week where you need to decide your strategy. So between this deadline and the next deadline, that is when you really need to decide, what am I going to do about my free hit and wildcard. And at that stage, you then need to start applying that every single time to the transfers that you're looking to make. But with that in mind, Saka is always number one. I've been saying this for a while now. There was a slight temptation like 8 or 9 games ago to sell Saka to fund some of my other moves. But after that very small consideration, he's just been brilliant. The underlying data's there. Eye test is there. FPL points are there. The next 3 fixtures are just so good as well. He's got Sheffield United, Newcastle and Brentford. So 3 really nice fixtures. There's very little to say on Saka other than just, if you don't currently own Saka, bring Saka into your team. In second, I do have Hwang, just because the next 3 fixtures are so good. Possibility of penalties, we just spoke about him, but Hwang would be in second for me. So if you've got Saka already and you're looking to bring a midfielder this week, I probably would have Hwang towards the top of the list. In third is a player that I've been chatting about all week, mentioned by a few others as well, but maybe going under the radar slightly, and that is Martin Ødegaard. His data recently has really, really improved. He's actually playing a slightly deeper role than what we've seen in the past, but he's still managing to create chances, and he's also still having a few long shots as well. And there's always the off chance that he takes a penalty off of Saka at some point, along with, of course, set pieces too. So with the next 3 fixtures coming up, you can definitely do a lot worse than Ødegaard. And then in fourth, I've got Neto. So the top 4, whilst they're sort of alternating, is 2 Arsenal and 2 Wolves mids. And that really does come down against the next 3 fixtures. They've actually both got Newcastle and Sheffield United in their next 3. But then they've also got Brentford, and then Wolves have Fulham. So almost identical fixtures. Very, very, very positive, though, from an attacking perspective. So a Wolves or an Arsenal mid, I think, is great. But there is something to just say here. If you are 99% sure that you're not going to free hit in 29 because you've not got your free hit, let's say, you're just definitely committing to that strategy. None of these, Arsenal and Wolves aren't confirmed to play in game week 29. In fact, they are more likely than not to blank. Therefore, there is something to be said for just saying, I'm going to bring in a player this week that definitely plays in 29. And I've had that thought throughout the week. I know for a fact, unless something goes horribly wrong in the FA Cup results that makes my team look a lot weaker for 29, I probably don't want to use my free hit because I'm already in a pretty good position. So do I just go all in on having a strong team in 29 and bring in someone like a Leon Bailey? The reason I'm starting to go off this slightly, and we'll discuss it a little bit more when we look at my team at the end of the video, is you just never know what's going to happen in the FA Cup. Let's say that Leeds do beat Chelsea. Well, then Chelsea and Arsenal have a fixture, and then I'll regret going for Bailey over someone like Hwang because I'm going to have 11 players anyway. So I kind of feel like I kind of want to get a little bit more aggressive with the next 3 fixtures, which is why I'm looking more at the likes of Hwang and Ødegaard. But if you do want a player with good fixtures, plays in 29, and has some higher upside, Bailey is up there. The only slight concern is around game week 27-28, the Europa Conference League starts up for Aston Villa, and therefore there is the chance that Bailey doesn't start the odd game in the Prem. And I think they have a game between game week 28 and game week 29. And if they need him to play in that game, you could see Diaby get the West Ham game. So there is the slight worry about rotation with Bailey, especially given Europe is coming back. I've got Garnacho in the 6th. Probably dropped him down slightly. Could even drop him further, given that Hojlund is out for 2 to 3 weeks now. But Garnacho will still get chances to return, and he's very, very cheap. And he does have the chance of playing in 29. So I definitely still think Garnacho is on the menu. He's just a little bit of a weaker option now for me. The next 4 options I still think are good, but they're just not as good as the top 6. Obviously, I've got Bowen in 7th. His data across the season, really good. Over the last 6, horrible, but that is due to Paqueta being out, in my opinion. And what I like about Bowen is not only does he play in 29, but the next 3 fixtures are also very strong in 26, 27, and 28. So for Bowen, I think you're getting some short-term upside because I like the fixtures, but you're also getting a confirmed fixture in 29 too. And Bowen just plays 90 minutes in every game that he's available. So I do still really like Jared Bowen. I'm just not quite sure he's as good as the other players that I've already mentioned. In 8th, I've got Douglas Luiz. Very cheap, on penalties, on set pieces, nailed, great minutes. He's got pretty much everything you'd want from an asset, other than the fact that his open play goal threat is atrocious. It's 0.11 non-penalty expected goals per 90. Which means, based on his minutes of getting about 85 minutes per game, across a 10-game spell, you're expecting him to accumulate the expected goals of 1. It's actually been a little bit better, his goal threat recently, but still, like, his open play goal threat just is nowhere near good enough for me to consider bringing him in. But if you like penalties now, players, and a player that you know will play for a fact in Game Week 29, Douglas Luiz is your man. In 9th, I've got Pascal Gross. There has to be some mention for Brighton players because they've got a couple of good fixtures still coming up, and they've been scoring goals as well recently. The reason I'm not that massive on Pascal Gross is simply because they're almost definitely blanking in 29, and longer term, I don't particularly like Brighton's fixtures. But if you just want to play it for the next couple, and specifically for 26, the likes of Pascal Gross and the Dingra could be good options for you, again, especially if you are looking to free hit in 29. And I've just got in 10th Kudus. The reason he is so low down is his data has been bad across the entire season. At no point this season has Kudus shown good goal threat and good assist threat, at least when you look at the numbers. Yes, he passes the eye test. Yes, he has the same fixtures as Bowen, but Bowen's data across the season has just been consistently better. So those are 10 players that I'd look at. There are players that aren't on here, the likes of Rashford and Bruno you could go for. You could take a punt on Martinelli, on Trossard. You could go for someone like a Sarabia instead, as I discussed. There will be players that I've not mentioned, but these would be my top 10 midfielders to buy. So there were lots of questions coming in around, or just all sorts of stuff about, should I take a hit this week for this player? What is the maximum number of hits that you can take this week? What is the minimum number of players that you can field? And all of those lovely questions. And sadly, I'm just not going to be able to give you a number because it doesn't exist. I can't sit here and say, at minus 16, you do this. You have to field at least 8 players because it really depends on the strategy, the players that you're bringing in, who you already own as well. Because you could own 8 players this week and comfortably outscore me if the 8 players that you own are just better players. So I always feel like quality is more important than quantity in blank game weeks. But also, if you're bringing in players that not only have a fixture this week but help you in the future, that is a better hit than a player that just helps you this week. I equally think if you know for a fact you're going to wildcard in 27, you don't want to take a minus 16 this week because it's very unlikely to pay off immediately. So I'm not going to be able to sit here and give you a specific number or just give you advice that works for everyone. But I did just want to talk a little bit about hits and wildcards. So I'm also going to discuss kind of the best point to wildcard in the future, because I know a lot of people are teetering on the edge of, do you free hit, do you wildcard this week, or do you just take a monster hit, or just field very few players? And I'll sort of discuss that. I actually just, believe it or not, I do prefer a wildcard this week slightly to a free hit. I just don't like this week for a free hit at all. I don't think you're gaining much at all in terms of strategy or in terms of points this week. I just don't see the advantage at all, because a lot of the players that you want to sell are probably injured. The likes of Jota is a good example there. And I just don't see many high upside fixtures for this week. So for me, I much prefer wildcard to free hit for this week. But I also do prefer waiting to wildcard until next week, because next week we'll have a lot more information around Game Week 29. That being said, I say that being said far too often, but that being said, we do also have a lot of information already. We know for a fact that 6 teams will be playing in Game Week 29. We know for a fact that the next 3 fixtures for Wolves and Arsenal are exceptional. So there are points to be had over the next 3 weeks, and you can already get a certain amount of players out for 29. And if there are loads of upsets, you might have to take a couple of hits. But I do think we have a lot of information already that you can utilize to build a good wildcard. In the next section, I will show you both a free hit and a wildcard draft if you're looking to play a chip. But so is the wildcard viable this week? Absolutely, but only if you really need it, or you've just got a feeling that this is the week to go. I do much prefer Game Week 27. At what point do you choose to wildcard instead of taking a hit? Again, I don't think there is a magical number, but we are talking about minus 16s, minus 20s, minus 8s and 12s. It's worth saving a brilliant chip for that to get more information, in my opinion. But it's not just about the number of hits you're taking. It's about what those hits are getting you. If you told me that you could take a minus 12 this week to get 11 players, 3 or 4 doublers in 28, a good team in 29, and a good structure to your squad as well to save the free hit and the wild card, I'd say take that -12 in a heartbeat, because you're not only taking a hit, but you're getting a strong squad of strong players now. You're serving yourself well for the future blanks and doubles too, and you're saving your chips. If you told me that you're taking a -12 to field 11, but that 11 involves like Archer, Taylor, Bayer, like players like that you don't want to play. Maybe you've got a double up in defensive like Botman and Dubravka, and you've got to take a -12 just to get 11 players. On top of that, you've got no doublers for 28. And when you look at your team for 29, based on what it's like now, you're nowhere near having a squad for 29. In that case, it's not only about taking a hit, but your squad's just a bit of a mess. And I think when you're getting to that kind of stage, that's when you're looking at a wild card instead of a hit. When you're not only needing to take a hit, but the hit doesn't even get your squad close to where you want it to be. There was like a specific question. I think a lot of people might have questions similar to that this week, which is, would you take a hit to get a defender to field 11 or just avoid and decide next week? Or WEC, apparently there's a typo in here. I think in this situation, it depends again on the defender that you're bringing in and your strategy. So I'll give you an example. If you're looking to try and save the free hit in 29, you've got maybe 5 players for 29 already confirmed, and you don't own someone like a Pau Torres who's on your screen, I don't mind the idea of a -4 for Pau Torres this week. The reason I say that, it's an okay fixture this week with the chance for a clean sheet, 2 decent fixtures after that, and he's confirmed to play in 29. So yes, even if he doesn't keep a clean sheet this week and only gets you 2 points, well then you're 2 points down. But he'll make that up in the future, and it's probably a transfer you would have made anyway. So in that case, I quite like it. The other situation where I don't mind taking a -4 is for a defender with high upside, especially over the next couple of weeks. So for example, someone like a Ryan Ait-Nouri, that is a decent transfer again, because he could immediately pay back the -4, or potentially he could pay it back over the next couple of weeks. So I do prefer that. And in general, if it's to field an 11th player, we always joke that it's a -2, not a -4. The reason being, if they just get you 2 appearance points, well, you're only losing 2 points then by taking the hit. So in general, I don't mind it. Where I'm a little bit less sure is if you're bringing in a real rotation risk player that you don't even know is going to start. That's always a big no-no for me. And then also if you're bringing in a player that just has no chance of really getting you anything this week. Senesi or Senesi, however you want to pronounce it. I love him for 27 and 28. Burnley, Sheffield United and Luton in 2 game weeks. But is he going to get you anything this week? It's very unlikely against Man City. So in this case, I'd rather field 10 players and just do that next week. He could even get you minus points, potentially, if Man City do very well there. So that's the sort of situation I'll be looking at. Hopefully that helps you to decide for yourself. But in general, I am much more willing to take hits in blank weeks, because it just through appearance points alone, you'll make back some of the points that you've taken. But I would be trying to bring in players that have really high upside now or a longer term benefit to your team. I've listed 4 times here where you might look to wildcard, if not in 26, just to give you a bit of an idea about what you might be missing out on. But I really don't hate the idea of a wildcard in 26. So the next viable time is probably game week 27 or 28. The reason we say that is before the game week 27 deadline, again, you're going to find out all of the information around the 5th round of the FA Cup results, which means we will know for a fact who blanks in 29 and therefore have a pretty good idea about which teams double in 34 and 37. So 27 will just have so much more information around the future blanks and doubles. After that, you're looking at potentially something like game week 30 or 31, which is where I'm looking to wildcard. I think this is very useful if you're not looking to free hit in 29. The reason we say that is you can dead end your team into 29, make sure that you put out a good team for 29, and then restructure and sell all the players that you don't want to own for 30 and 31 onwards. For example, in game week 29, you might own like double West Ham, double Luton, and like 1 Nottingham Forest player, and you're like, yeah, that looked good in 29 for me, but I now don't want to own those players in 30 and 31. That's fine. You can wildcard out of that. It obviously also allows you to build towards double game week 34 and double game week 37. The next 2 times are around similar kind of thing to set you up for the back end of the season, but specifically to set you up and really target 34 and 37, which are the 2 remaining double game weeks. So you could wildcard in 33 or 34 to set up for a bench boost, or to set up to have a good team in game week 34. And then the one that I really like is wildcarding in game week 35, maybe 36, to set up for a bench boost in the biggest double game week of the season, which is double game week 37. I really do like that as a plan. And the reason I like that is it's going to be probably a really big double game week. And it also just allows you to really attack those final 3 or 4 game weeks and finish the season strong. So those are 4 other times where you might look to wildcard. If you look at those and go, oh, I'm not even that convinced, then just wildcard this week. That's absolutely fine. I just think, for me, in order of how good they could be, I'm looking at 31 as being the best, then like a 27, then a 35, then a 33. But it really does depend on your team. So if you are still looking to wildcard or free hit, let's take a look at a couple of drafts right now. So like I said, if it is team dependent, and if you are looking to free hit or wildcard this week, I still wanted to cover you. So here are a couple of drafts on your screen. Feel free to pause them because I'm not going to spend too long talking about them, and just look at them yourselves. For the free hit, I'll start with that because it's just so easy for me. Just target players that you think will do well this week. I know that's a very obvious point to make, but I would just look at players that have a really high ceiling. In a free hit, you can go for players that are maybe slightly more of a rotation risk or slightly more injury prone, or you don't have to risk that if that player does get injured or if they don't start. Yeah, it's not ideal, but you don't have to carry them moving forward. So players like Matty Cash and Ryan Ait-Nouri, I'd be all over them because I think both will start. I wouldn't want either of them on a wild card. If I was going to have a Wolves and Villa midfielder, as we'll, defenders we'll discuss in a second, it would be Pau Torres for Aston Villa, and it would probably be a Dawson or a Kilman. But in a single week, you go for the high upside picks. The three fixtures that I think are there to target, but specifically the two fixtures really, is Wolves versus Sheffield United. I definitely have triple Wolves. And Arsenal versus Newcastle. Based on what we know, I would go and target that and go for triple Arsenal. So I've got Ait-Nouri, Hwang and Neto. You could replace Neto if you wanted to for another defender, but I think I would go for the double attack. And then for Arsenal, I've decided to actually go for one defender because I think it's better from an attacking perspective, and then two midfielders. So I've got Gabriel, Saka, and I've actually gone for Trossard because I still think he'll start this week. And again, I wouldn't want to own Trossard moving forward. I'd prefer Odegaard, but in a single week, Trossard does feel like he has a pretty high ceiling. I've then just got a few other players. I've actually got triple Aston Villa. I actually think Forest have been defending fairly well recently, so maybe not ideal having Ollie Watkins, but I still think I would. And then they've not been attacking poorly, but a home fixture, when they've got a relatively settled side at the moment, Aston Villa, albeit not a very strong defence, I don't mind the idea of Martinez and Cash, but you could go for a Varane or a Dalot in defence if you wanted to, or you could go for Onana in goal, and you could just mix it up a bit, maybe go for Henderson in goal against Burnley, or go for, as you can see on the bench, Anderson in defence. You don't have to go for the double up there. And then for that final spot, I think for me it's between a Manchester United attacker and Ivan Toney. Toney's probably the safer bet, but I do still feel like Manchester United will get chances against Fulham without Paulinho. So I've gone for Marcus Rashford in that spot. So that's roughly what I'd be going with on a free hit. The wildcard is a little bit more difficult because it depends if you want to commit to not free hitting in 29 or commit to free hitting in 29, or what I've done here, which is kind of leave your options open a little bit. So I've got, if we just count them, Areola, Pau Torres, Reguilon, Bailey, Watkins, Son, and then looks like Doughty, but you've got 6 players confirmed to have a fixture in 29, which puts you in a good position. But then you've got other predicted players, and then you've sort of hedged your bets with a few other players. Depending on cup upsets, it looks like you'll probably be able to field close to 11. But again, you could have to free hit in 29 if there are upsets in 27, which is obviously the issue that we don't yet, before 27, I should say, we don't yet know the results of the FA Cup 5th round. So you've sort of left your options open with this. Key thing for me, I'd have triple Villa. So I've got Powell, Bailey and Watkins. You could have Douglas Luiz in there. I would still attack the upside by having at least one Wolves player. I've got Hwang in here. I would definitely have triple Arsenal. It's up to you if you want to go Gabriel and Saliba, or Saka, a midfielder, and Gabriel. So in this case, I've got Odegaard instead of Saliba. The other thing that I would do is have triple Bournemouth. The reason for that is they double in 28 with an impeccable double, but they also have a chance of playing in 29. So I've got Neto, Senesi and Solanke, triple Bournemouth. And then I've got Son on the bench because I think from 27 onwards, you are going to want to own at least one Spurs asset. And I've got Doughty on the bench as well, assuming that he's fine, which we don't yet know, but I think he will be. He also doubles in 28 and has a good chance of playing in Game Week 29. So there we go. That's roughly what I'd be going with on a Game Week 26 wildcard or free hit. I do actually really like the look of the wildcard, and if my team was in a really dodgy position, I wouldn't mind playing it this week. But if you can just get away with just fielding 10 players, and they're decent players this week, and you can just delay the wildcard one more week, I think it will be valuable for you. So guys, this is my team as things stand. I thought I'd just give you a bit of an updated thought process on my team because I have changed my thinking slightly around the players that I'm looking to bring in this week. I've currently got 9 players, and based on the press conference updates, all 9 look like they're in contention to feature in some regard or start. So I should have all 9 getting minutes, hopefully. The only risk is obviously if Ake doesn't start, he might come off the bench. Maybe there's some sort of issue around Taylor. Foden, you just never know with Man City. But I think generally they should be fine. So I am looking at still selling Diogo Jota and Darwin as part of the -4 hit. I don't feel the need to sell Richarlison. Pedro Porro, we don't have an update, but actually someone commented on one of his TikToks saying, should I sell you from my FPL team? And he said, don't sell me. But it was like a jokey reply. That doesn't mean anything. But the fact that he replied with don't sell me, maybe optimistically we're saying that he's not going to be out too long term. And so I think I'm going to hold on to Pedro Porro until we at least get an update from Postecoglou. So Richarlison and Porro is staying, and Palmer's just super cheap, and I don't need to sell him this week. So that's the way the bench will look. So I'm going to sell Diogo and Darwin. I'm going to keep the Darwin one very simple. Unless I get some sort of information before the deadline tomorrow, Darwin will be coming Solanke. We spoke about that throughout the week. I'm going to want Solanke from 27 onwards. I don't want to sell Watkins or Haaland, so that spot has to be Solanke. I'm just going to do it this week. I know he plays against Ake. Oh well. So Darwin to Solanke's done. The other thing that I need to think about then is kind of, I've only got the 1 free transfer, so it is for a -4. What do I want to do with Jota? So let me just put Solanke in here. I've changed my thinking on this slightly. I was actually after listening to Praz on Deadline Dilemmas over on Scout, but Praz kind of spoke about the fact that we are going on the basis that Game Week 29 is going to have no upsets in the FA Cup 5th round before 27, and therefore 29 is going to be the fixtures that we've projected. But that's not the way FA Cup happens. That's not the way football happens. We are probably more likely than unlikely to get an upset in Game Week 29. So when I look at my team, I'm already in a really good position. I've got Areola, Taylor, Porro, if he's fit, Powell, Richarlison, and Watkins confirmed fixtures. Obviously, if they get injured, then they're not confirmed. But confirmed at least you have a fixture. And then I have the option, like I said, if Chelsea lose to Leeds, Gabriel Saka Palmer will immediately play. If Brighton beat Wolves, then if Leicester beat Bournemouth, then Solanke will have a fixture. And if I bring in Hwang, he'll have a fixture. So yes, I only have 6 confirmed for 29, and if they all go the way that we expect, I might have to take an extra hit if I don't bring a player that's confirmed to play in 29. But I also just think there could be upsets, and I kind of just want to target the weeks ahead of me. So I was looking at Bailey in this position, was the number 1, because I was like, you know what? I just want to get an extra fixture for Game Week 29, but I think I'm just fixating too much on 29, and just like I said, assuming that the games are going to go the way that we think they are, and they probably won't, right? So I think the plan now is to bring in Hwang. And I know these are so boring because everyone's doing Hwang and Solanke in, but oh well. Like, boring isn't the worst thing. Boring probably means that they're maybe the best transfers on paper. And I do want a piece of the attacking pie against Sheffield United. I think that's a great, great fixture. And Hwang is a genuine captaincy shout. He's not going to be a captain for me, but you could consider it. And I think any time where I look at someone and go, yeah, they are a captaincy shout, if I can get them in, I probably should. So yes, it might put me in a weaker position for 29, but we just don't know. Let's say that Liverpool lose to Southampton, which given they're missing some key players is possible. Let's say Liverpool lose to Southampton and Manchester United lose to Forest. You could see them both happen. Unlikely, I know. I'd have to free hit a wild card anyway. There is no way, because that would mean that Liverpool don't blank in 29 and Manchester United don't blank in 29. I'd be sat here with no players apart from Kelleher from those two teams. So I would free hit or wildcard anyway. So I kind of feel like until we know in 27, let's just attack the week ahead of us. Hopefully that makes sense. So I am looking at Hwang in. The only other possibility, if I do keep this frame of mind of let's just attack, is Ødegaard. Because I only have 2 Arsenal at the moment. Most people won't be able to get to Ødegaard because they might have double Arsenal defence, or they don't have the funds for some reason or something like that. But when we look at the fixtures, they're pretty much the same as Hwang's fixtures, right? They're obviously home and away are different, but they've got Newcastle and Sheffield United the next 2 as well, and then Brentford at home in 28. I would argue that these 3 are as good as, if not better slightly, than Wolves' fixtures, considering I think Brentford have been defending very poorly. But on top of that, Ødegaard and Arsenal will just create more chances than Wolves will, and Ødegaard's been playing very well. Like, if we look at his data in recent games, 0.88, 0.82, 0.57, 0.54, the only slight concern is there's not that much goal threat from that, right? It's mainly creativity with Ødegaard, but I kind of like the option of him as well. So I would say my updated ordering, it's still the same 3 players that I said I was looking at before, but whereas before it was Bailey, Hwang, Ødegaard, I would just say now they've all switched around. So for me, it's now Hwang, Ødegaard, Bailey. Simply because I just have some doubts around Bailey's minutes given the Europa Conference League will be kicking in soon. And I also just think that I don't need to confirm an extra fixture in 29 right now. So that's the way I'm leaning at the moment. But tune into the deadline stream tomorrow. It will be 11:30 a.m. start time because it's an afternoon deadline. Tune into the deadline stream. We'll discuss any early team news that we get around our key players. And I'll, of course, also discuss which transfers I'm likely to make. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 26 deadline decisions video. If you did enjoy today's video and you got any use out of it, please do smash that like button. Let's aim for 2,500 likes on today's video. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please do consider doing so. Make sure to tune into the deadline stream tomorrow where we'll hopefully get some early team news and I'll lock in my transfers. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.